Wow, what a week. High tension, high disappointment for some, high relief for others, and a perceived aura of finality. Notice I said perceived, at least for the time being. Deeply divided, what's next? Are we all ready to jump off the deep end? Good evening, thanks for joining me. I'm Nicolette de Vidar. I don't know about you, but when looking at the past 2 years in my own life, it feels like they were years of transitioning, transformative stepping stones, clearing paths, increasing consciousness, leading to the cusp of leaping into a new direction, at least for me in my life. In a way, it feels much lighter, like a fog of personal delusion is lifting. Listening to others, though, I don't think I'm alone. Observing the high tension last week and the months leading up to this, with media and tech companies going haywire, making unprecedented moves into what could be perceived as censorship, and people turning their lives upside down in many cases, it feels like something culminated in the last 4 days, and we're moving into a different stage. Each of us with different hopes, different fears, different viewpoints, different voices. More clarity on how you or we want to live in our personal lives. So, have we graduated? In terms of knowing what we want as nation and individuals, each in their own space, of course, as human beings in discerning what matters to you personally and to us collectively? Have we gained clarity and resolve in what each of us deems worthy to live for? The past 6 months felt a bit like experiencing the sword of truth that carved away what no longer matters to each of us and strengthened what we want to keep going forward, each to their own, of course. So let's talk about what it is we hope, fear, want, and expect next. My guests tonight, joining us via Zoom, Annika Rahman. She's co-chair for the Virginia AAPI Biden-Harris Council and Deputy Director of Bangladeshis for Biden National Council. Having joined me in a pre-taped interview today is Cindy Rowling. She's a Trump supporter, immigrant, and business owner of 2 businesses. Unfortunately, she cannot join us live tonight due to work commitments this evening, but I spoke to her early this morning and will play her take on things via a Zoom interview. And joining me here in the studio is Al Ford, a passionate youth basketball coach and member of the National Employees Association fighting for diversity and inclusion in the workplace. Thank you so much, the 2 of you who are here with us. And I will say thank you also for Cindy, but I did that already via Zoom. So this has been a very, very crazy week. I'm going to do a quick sound check. Annika, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
I think we can turn you up a little bit. Okay, so going into this week, I wanted to start actually with Annika here for a second. Let me ask you straight out, how do you feel?
Well, first and foremost, I want to say thank you, Nicolette, for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure being here. I feel good, as many Americans do. It was exhausting 3 days having to stay up, but finally we see all the hard work and the fruits of our labor coming to fruition. So it's really it's amazing. I feel really good.
You feel really good. Okay, so compare this with how you felt in election night. How actually did you feel during election night?
I'm going to be quite honest with you. I did think Biden was going to win. I've seen it how it was 4 years ago, and I've seen how much effort and energy was poured into this time. However, I also knew it would be very close. So as on the election, I was very scared, and I know we wouldn't get results. So I think like a lot of us, we stayed up night and night. I would refresh the statistics and the data every 10 minutes to make sure that the numbers were getting reported and we were getting more electoral votes. But it was exciting. It got a little more nervous throughout the days because it was taking longer and longer. But finally, when we saw that Trump's possibilities and pathways were becoming slim to none, and that's how I knew, you know what, he has no way of winning now. It's just about now announcing it and conceding or contesting it.
Al, I'm going to ask you too, how do you feel?
Yes. There was a very popular movie called Waiting to Exhale. So Waiting to Exhale took me to Saturday afternoon, and that was the first time I felt like I could breathe and exhale and feel like not just myself, and my family, but that the whole nation could move forward from that day. It will be quite a journey, but I did feel like as of Saturday afternoon, we could move forward, and now we can take steps that will gradually build to where we need to go.
Okay, let's back up here for a second. When you said, and one could actually literally feel like you're a lot more relaxed.
Yes,
We'll
yes,
say that.
yes.
But what leading up to this,
Yes.
when you said I could feel more like moving forward,
Yes.
what exactly were you looking for, or did you mean to by saying moving forward?
Yes.
What did you feel like was holding up
Yes.
the forward movement previously?
Over the past 4 years, during President Trump's presidency, and I call him number 45, during number 45's presidency, there was anxiety, and anxiety built. And why did that anxiety build? We felt, when I say we, members of the community, others that are like-minded, like myself, felt like there was a lack of sensitivity. Many of us in the business community, corporate community, and other organizations, there are diversity training, sensitivity training, and we just felt like we were living in a world and a slice of the universe that lacked sensitivity that would unite and build us as a country. And so that feeling built and built and built to such a heightened level over the last 4 years that it did create anxiety and stress, not just for me, but within our community.
Sensitivity for what? Sensitivity for the language that was being used, or sensitivity for simply not being attuned enough to what other people needed? Because I mean, the stuff that was going on in the workplace, that's not something new. I mean, people may be able to, blame the President Trump for many things, but I don't think we can actually blame him for insensitivity in the workplace, which has been around all the time,
and
for a long time.
You are right on track with that. And so the building of that lack of sensitivity. And so when I say lack of sensitivity, even when we talk about the slogan that was used prior to 2016 to President Trump's election, "Make America Great Again," many of those in my community, myself, I will speak for myself, felt like that was lack of sensitivity. I don't feel like it was meant to be racist, but it was insensitive because the imagery that was created by "Make America Great Again" harkened back to a time when many of us did not feel that America was so great, that we knew that each day was about progress and the hope of progress. The "yes, we can" that President Obama made us feel and digest and believe in, that yes, we can continue to move forward. With this presidency, with number 45, we felt, and I felt, a lack of sensitivity, starting with that slogan, "Make America Great Again." How do you qualify that? 1960s? Definitely not. 1970s? Maybe. 1980s? Maybe. So I felt it was a lack of sensitivity. And then when we talk about so many opportunities to denounce the extreme radical edges of the Republican Party, I did not see a great effort to make a line of delineation between the beliefs that will unite the country and leaning towards or compromising or covering up for the radical edges of the party. So that was a lack of sensitivity for me.
One could, of course, also argue it was also missing on the other side, on the far left. And I think that's always the case. When you go too far, there is a problem, right?
Yes,
and I think that's part of the fears that were evoked with all of that. I will pick up the "Make America Great Again" part in a little bit, because I want to dive in a little bit more into the sensitivity issue on this one, which I really think is important. But I want to ask both of you, and I'm going to ask Annika first. So, having this tremendous build-up for the last few months, the last few days, and now really settling in. Yes, there is the excitement of going into, there's the excitement of movement, of maybe going into a new direction. But also when you sometimes look back after an extremely stressful time, So when you think about yourself, has your thinking about anything changed in the last 48 hours?
I gotta say, when we initially confirmed, or when we saw that PA was flipped blue, and then we saw other states that were going to be blue as well, I think what my first thought was, oh, we finally got Trump out. And then after I heard this speech that Kamala Harris gave, I'm like, well, this makes me very emotional. I realized that we have the first women as vice president. It's historical for us. It means a lot for women in this country and what it means in our history and how we've progressed. But I do also have to say it's important to recognize that it was a historical amount of voters this time, not only just for Biden being the first time running for president, but also for Donald Trump running for a second term. Both had a historical amount of votes, a total of 145 million and counting. Amount of voters. But I think the important conversation, what strikes to me, is that the fact that it was so close means that we need to have a conversation in this country with each other about what it is that we don't align with. And just to coexist, to move forward, it's very important. But I also want to mention how we have the presidency, but there is the Senate that the Democrats don't have. So of course we hope that Biden can pass as many as promised as he did, but of course it's not going to be as swift because we don't have the Senate, and Democrats did lose a lot of House seats as well.
Mm-hmm. What about you? Have you changed any of your thinking in the last 48 hours, or when you look back, you kind of say, well, maybe I didn't get this right, or maybe I thought differently about this leading up to this?
Mm-hmm. I am even more firmly entrenched in the idea that growth, being progressive, growth, even if you're a moderate, to progress and for growth. And so I am in that mindset that I want to grow. I want our community to grow. I want us to take this opportunity to really understand how divided we are. And I'm looking for the silver lining in that we as Americans, we do truly want to grow together, that we want to take what we grew up with in my community, understanding the melting pot, and taking that and moving forward. So right now, understanding that right now is so critical to understand. And so one thought that I have is to truly understand in my history and my education, to understand that President Abraham Lincoln, number 16, what he must have went through when he looked out onto the landscape of America and felt the divide in the country. This week I've learned what, maybe just a fragment of the weight that he felt on his shoulders when he looked out and saw the critical divide in his country. And so I do feel now that many of us, I know I do, feel that weight of division in a country that compels me to do what I can to bring the country together. And whether it's a small way or whether it's rallying with my community or rallying with the nation to move forward.
Let's talk about that divide. Because everybody talks about the divide, but really I think everyone feels it differently because it means different things for everyone, right? So let's talk a little bit about where you see the divide. Annika, I'm going to start with you. Where do you think where the divide really is? Is this a different way of looking at life? Or is this a different way of how we approach things? Or is this a different way? What is exactly the divide?
I gotta be honest with you, personally, it's interesting because when I'm often asked, I've been on different panels and often asked why there's so many minorities who voted for Trump, why are there any women voting for Trump? Truly, America is really not diverse only in its color and race and religion, but also in our thoughts. I don't think it's necessarily the best thing to say that because I'm from a certain group that I'm expected to vote for somebody because that's what the stereotype is. I think it's important to understand that we all come from different education backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, from different environments that shape our thoughts and our thinking. And when I look at when I think about some of the divide, it comes back to some of the immigrants and some of the minorities really relate their history back to what's happened in their back home. Like some Hispanics did not want to vote for, especially Cubans did not want to vote for Biden because they were afraid of the progressive growth of socialism and what it's done to their country. These are small examples, and then we have, I know, immigrants, right, brown South Asian immigrants who separate themselves from the new immigrants and the long-time immigrants. So they feel as if this is their country, they've been here long enough, and then they separate themselves from the new immigrants who want to come in who hasn't gained a status yet. So, and also to recognize that we come from different privileges and different backgrounds, so that really shapes the way we think. But what is important is to have these conversations, and there could be that one policy that really helped you in your life, and it could be a one issue based thing for you, and it was a make it or break it when it comes to these legislations and what you want to pass. So I gotta say, it's many. I would say it's many things at the same time. I think it's important to have these conversations with what is it that we disagree on. But also when we talk about like spectrum of our politics, some people feel like the Democrats have moved too much on the left and become radical. And the same thing with the moderate Republicans who believe that the Republican parties have gone too far and have become bigots, and they don't know how to be presidential. They don't have a president who's presidential. So I think it's a multitude of things that is a layer, because we're all shaped in different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. What's your take on that, Al?
Yes. Division can be set up by the very parties that we have. Right now, we're divided by Democrat and Republican for the most part in this country. That in and of itself, I believe, is a growing ground for division. We are so diverse in this country. Our thought patterns, our communities, whether it's Hispanic, the different Asian communities, the different thought patterns, and I'm a member of a Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity. There are so many different fraternities. You may be a member of a church. I'm a member of a church. There's so many different churches. We have to have the motivation to be compelled to come together. So in that division that we feel so deeply right now, there has to be always a testing ground to say, I have to be willing to come together and to embrace the diversity. And so when we have in this country such an effort to deny racism, to deny that it exists, to deny that it's systematic in some shape or form, the denial that takes a great effort to deny it, that is where a division can take place. On the other side, when you, and I say myself as an African American, does not take time to understand the path that someone has walked in that may be from the other party or may not look like you, that can create division. So I feel that on both sides. But one thing that symbolizes what we're talking about, a division, when we can't even have a discussion about race and racism and systematic racism, and there's such an effort to deny it, then that is where the division continues to spread and grow apart, instead of being at a position and a point of taking advantage of that silver lining that I spoke of and use this opportunity to grow together.
When you talk about the denial, so one could say, and I think that's very much true, you can only understand or see in others what is prevalent in yourself. So in other words, what you probably perceive as denial as something maybe that some other people may really not see it. So I think that's what the frustrating part is, that sometimes you just can't see it. Of course, there are always people who deny things straight out of because they just do not want to come to grips and say it doesn't exist. But very often we can only see things that's kind of what's within you. Otherwise, it's really hard. So it seems to me that actually for us to go forward and listen to each other, there's heavy work in personal development involved.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
And also in understanding a little bit the fear, what's behind that. Because I've talked to a lot of different people, and when you listen to that, everybody gives you that different worldview of how they want to live. But when you really listen to the core of it, we don't want to live that differently. Everybody wants to have a peaceful life. You want to be curious and open. You want to have a job that brings out your talent. You want to do all those things. So I think that the human core is pretty much very even in what we all want. But then comes this fear thing. And when I talk to people, it's very often when we speak about the divide, you hear a lot, it almost feels like we have these internal walls that feel like, well, when I voice my view, it somehow doesn't come across. Do you two feel that too at times?
I think so I've had personal conversations with Republicans, and I will say that what happens is that often I'm not the one who will be like, oh, you voted for Trump, so I don't want to speak to you. It's more for me like, hey, I don't have a problem having a conversation. You can even continue to stay in touch with me if you like. It's all about, for me, it's about growth and having an educational conversation, understanding one another. It's all about empathy. That's what I promote for our party, and that's what I promote for myself, and I think it should be the same when I'm listening to a Republican. I'm sorry, what was your question? I just lost my train of thought.
Actually, I lost my own thread now too in going through all this. But we were talking about the divide, and if you can feel an internal wall at times. So when you feel very strongly about something and you want to get your point across, and you feel that other people just cannot whatsoever see that, you're not even in the same universe, right?
What ends up happening is when we build that wall, what ends up happening is we end up having a lot of silent Trump supporters. And then we get surprised by why there are so many supporters, and why does he have many votes? Well, because they went out and voted anyways, but they didn't think they could vocalize it without having an open conversation, which even is on the other side too. Democrats can feel like they can't say what they want to a Republican without them dehumanizing them. And I agree with Al when he talks about when we have conversations, there needs to at least be an establishment of something that exists. Like, you can't deny that racism exists, right? You need to have that conversation, an open mind to come to the table to understand my pain and my experience. And when you deny that, you initially then cut off the process for growth with each other. So I think that's what's important to realize. We do need to have a conversation with everybody peacefully, and it's almost as if like religion, both people can speak about it. You'll still walk out with the same thoughts and what you believe, but there's an understanding, and now you have empathy for one another.
Absolutely. And Nicolette, you were so right, the personal development and that growth. Once again, we talk about diversity training, leadership development, but we all have to be willing to have that personal development within ourselves. But that's the willingness to grow from beyond where you are. I have the firm belief, if you believe in enlightenment, and you believe in growth, and you believe in love, that in and of itself will compel you to move forward. It will compel you to embrace your brother. And so within my community and my closest friends and family, I feel, speaking for myself, that maybe there's no better time than right now to build the bridges that we need, because the divide is so evident within our lifetime, within my adult lifetime and career, and walking and working within the community. It is evident, it's palpable. We can taste it, we can feel it, we know it's there. So now we can have a conversation in ways that we couldn't have that conversation last year, or maybe even last week prior to the election.
Yeah.
Today we can have a conversation that begins at a new starting point, that gives us a chance for a new beginning, because the denial will not be as strong.
I actually agree with that, and I think it's also it's a little bit like in a divorce scenario. I don't know, if you have gone through a divorce, you probably understand what I'm talking about. Very often, when it's like a high tension, there's a lot of arguing going back and forth. There comes a point where you feel like all boxing gloves are off, and you can just be real and say, "This is what bothers me. This is what I'm afraid of. This is what I'm hoping for," and that's how you kind of get across. And I do feel we're at this, I'm like you, I feel we actually are at this point where we say, let's just sit down and say, what do you think about this? Without pointing fingers, without blaming others, without cutting things off, and without devalidating others' feelings and how they perceive this. Because everyone perceives things differently, and if you perceive them in a way, there is a reason why you
Yes.
perceive that in such a way, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
I agree. I want to talk a little bit about, so when I spoke to Cindy, her main fear was how the election was handled and how it played out. So she was very concerned, and we're going to listen to that in a little bit to see what she had to say. With tech firms and mainstream media censoring information, she said this is something, she's been here for 30 years, and this was never something she had been experienced before. It's something to be worried about. Again, going back to what you said, Annika, when you come from a background where you've experienced that before, your alarm bells went off. Actually, mine did too in this one, because I'm German. We've seen these things happen on the far right, and we also have seen these things happen on the far left, you know, with East Germany.
Yes.
So yeah, there is definitely cause for concern, and I myself had voiced concerns. I had all alarm bells go off. I'm like, wait a minute here, this is not going in the right direction.
Yes.
So these are just things I think we need to talk about more and bring this out. That's also a way to keep the power among the citizens, right? So in terms of fear, let's say if Biden had not won, what would have been your biggest fear? Annika, I'm going to start with you.
I'm going to say, when we talk about fear initially, I also want to just mention that when we talk about minorities being divided amongst each other, we have our nation divided. Trump really created this narrative. And we talk, even when it matters what media we look at, there's a narrative that was created that immigrants are the issue and the cause for our downfall in this country. And as a Muslim, hearing that there's a Muslim ban and all these are the reasons why there's terrorism and this is the solution to it, this shapes your thinking and creates a hatred for your neighbors. And this is what's dangerous. So, and this is just initially, right? For 4 years. So I can only imagine how worse it can get. His handling of the COVID on its own and how he used the term COVID affected the API community harshly. There was a rise of Islamophobia. There was a rise of racist and hate crimes being reported because of his language. When you have such a platform, especially as a president, and you're looked out for where people listen to you, especially Republicans trust you and rely on you, and you don't care to watch how you speak, says a lot about a leader. And I don't want to even call him a leader, right? And that's who we elect. So I can't imagine how worse it would have been in 4 years. But to be honest with you, it's more, I worry about the amount of depression people would have felt, the amount of sadness. There was so much pain when it happened 4 years ago, and it was twice the energy this time, twice the amount of people, grassroots folks, organizers, folks who really didn't even want to get involved anything beyond progressive, were Bernie lovers, really went in for Biden just to make sure that Trump was out. If after all those efforts we had Trump, I don't know how half of America would have coped.
That's great information. Lots more to talk about. We're going into a small break, and when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about hopes and fears. I want to take your statement as well, and then we're also going to listen to Cindy Rollings and see what she had to say, where she's coming from. That's going to be a pre-taped interview, so please stay with us. We'll be back.
Time is gonna come. Your time is gonna come. It's up to you to reach out to be that friend who comes along. Your day is gonna come.
When you make a friend, you make a difference.
Your day is gonna come.
Friendship, pass it on. A message from the Foundation for a Better Life.
Good one, son.
Last summer, my new dad took me on vacation. First, we went deep sea fishing. Wow!
I'm so proud of you, son.
And then we went on Thunder Shark. That was awesome! Let's go again! 3 times. I gotta say, it was pretty cool.
You don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of kids in foster care will take you just as you are.
What's it feel like when a woman's having a heart attack? Chest pain, like there's a ton of weight on your chest. Severe shortness of breath. Unexplained nausea. Cold sweats. There's an unusual tiredness and fatigue. There's unfamiliar dizziness or lightheadedness. Unusual pain in your back, neck, jaw, one or both arms, even your upper stomach are signs of having a heart attack. Don't make excuses. Make the call to 911 immediately. Learn more at womenshealth.gov/heartattack.
Operation Wonder Park is a go! There's nothing more powerful than imagination.
Honey, have you seen my cell phone?
But don't just imagine.
My park came to life?
Ooh, a plot twist.
Use STEM to build, create.
She did it.
And change the world.
Who's with me?
I'm more of a 2 feet on the ground kind of guy.
It's gonna hurt tomorrow.
If she can STEM, so can you. Find out more at She Can STEM.
Sustainability. We're in the second half of the show, deeply divided. We're getting down to the wire, bringing us to the real level of our souls. So after a high tension week, we're talking tonight about how people feel, what they fear, or what we all fear, and what going forward could look like. And that was the question before we went into the break. I'd like to hear your take on what would have been your worst fear if Biden would not have won.
Right. Nicola, it's such an interesting question because I am living within my fear. Even though I exhaled on Saturday afternoon, I'm still living within that. Prior to the election night, I said 269 to 269. We're at a tie, no winner.
Yeah.
That was my worst fear at that time. And understanding the division that could catapult us into, I felt that was the worst scenario. So even though the president-elect is Joe Biden or announced as Joe Biden, we do understand that television and media does not select a president, that we still have states that have to certify their election results, that we are still on a journey for Joe Biden to become president. The Electoral College doesn't vote until December 14th. And so between now and litigation that President Trump and his staff and team of super attorneys are going to launch on the courts starting on Monday. They've already started some. That was my worst fear because I feel that that division that we talked about, that divide, all this delay when there's no concession, when President Trump has not conceded, when we're still in a point of still not truly feeling that it's done, all it's going to do is create division. And the radical edges of both parties, once again, coming back to that division that I feel is set up by the fact that we're living in a country where we are dominated so much by just two parties, as complex and diverse as we are. How do we allow ourselves to just be within two parties? And that division now is strengthened even more. Hopefully there's some cracks in that wall. Hopefully there's some cracks in that division to where there will be many Republicans who congratulate President-elect Joe Biden and VP-elect Kamala Harris. Hopefully that happens. But at this point, we are still waiting for that. And so even though I exhaled Saturday afternoon, I've taken a deep breath again to find out what's going to happen. And that is my fear, that division will even widen even more.
So maybe going forward, though, maybe the two-party model isn't the right model going forward anymore. We see this in other countries too, by the way. So we see this, for example, in Europe. You see in many countries in Europe, you have the same issue where you had the mainstream parties, they're kind of dissolving. You see other parties being strengthened. You see new ones coming out. And I think this has also a lot to do a little bit with digitization because it brings boundaries down. So by definition, you're more spread out. And then you always have, if the center is more spread out, you get the corners a little wider. And then also people feel they can talk louder about things. So you hear more voices. So I think there are a lot of things that go with that, that have to do with that. And as we think about the 21st century, going with the two-party model may not be the future.
Right. The beauty of what I feel has been symbolized by our VP-elect, VP Harris, the beauty of that to bring the Asian community, and they've said South Asian community, to bring that unity and symbolism of diversity. I think she symbolizes that. And then we have President-elect Joe Biden, who's just a statesman, who reaches across aisles to bring people in to discussion. The people that know him best, Senator John McCain, who ran for president, one thing he could say about President-elect Joe Biden was that he would reach across the aisle, that you could talk with him, that he was someone that embraced mankind. That's what I'm hoping, that our diversity, that the light shines so brightly on our diversity during this time, that it will break down those walls. And that leads us into, we're not a monolith. The Hispanic community is not a monolith. Within the Republican Party, there are so many factions within the Republican Party.
Yep.
I would be happy if I saw where the Republican Party separated from their radical edges. I'd be happy to see if the Democratic Party separated from the radical edges. Now, maybe there's true representation, and in our effort to communicate, we can truly voice from a center of speaking authentically from what we believe in.
Annika, talking about Asians, since Al brought this up, and I know you come from that community, what is your take on what the main hope in that community is going forward?
So for the South Asian community, as you know, like I'm Bangladeshi, but the South Asians for Biden was made up of many Asians from all across our nation, and really what is our hope is that, one, this means possibilities. As Kamala Harris says, not actually only a woman, but a South Asian woman and a Black woman. This means that there's progress in this country, there's possibilities for women of color in this country. And when we talk about when we place a woman and a South Asian woman, we also believe that when our community is spoken for, that we speak for ourselves, right? So we trust and we rely that she will create policies that help uplift women and help uplift South Asians. And not just here, but even in our foreign lands and our foreign countries, to make sure that there's really creating foreign policy, that she is taking our advice and is aware and is culturally educated about South Asia.
So, of course, now we've heard both sides, a little bit more from the Democratic side. I do want to play the pre-taped interview we did with Cindy Rawlings, who's a Trump supporter. I talked to her this morning to get her take on where we're right now, also a little bit about her fears and her hopes going forward. So let's have a listen and see what she says.
Yes.
So, Cindy, you are a Trump supporter. How do you feel?
I have hope. That's how I'm feeling. Disappointed at the same time. Disappointed, it's America 2020, and this is how we are doing election today. It's really, I feel like I'm in a third world country today.
Why?
Because election, with all the technology and everything, it took how many days to count ballots and votes, and the most powerful country in the world taking this long to count, this time and age. It's weird to see how it's coming out. That's all. It's overall picture of it. I live in America. This day and age, I'm just disappointed where I stand. We talk about flying cars, and here we cannot count ballots. This is disappointing.
That's true. There are a lot of different standards. Absolutely. Yeah. What is at the bottom, though, of your disappointment? Obviously, yes, the disappointment is that the way the election turned out. But I want to get a little bit to the basis of it. Like, what is it that makes you so disappointed? Are you disappointed in America apart from the election? Are you afraid of where it's going, or is it where are you coming from on this one?
I would say first, I'm still grateful I live in America. Okay, overall, no matter which direction it goes, no matter, I still stay. I have roof over my head. I have food on the table. I am in the best place in the world. Okay, but putting all those aside, the way the whole election, how it came out, and when we vote, it's my voice, but I felt this election, it was not my voice. It was the Facebook voice, it was the Twitter voice, it was the media voice. Nobody wanted to listen to me. Nobody wanted to hear me. It's what they wanted to hear, what they wanted to say. That's what was out there. I couldn't speak. I couldn't. So voting was the only thing I had. So who I want to have, president for the next 4 years. And I felt that I did not have that. This whole thing with, how everything was running on the election day, I felt like I don't have the freedom of speech. And this is the starting point of it, starting with this election, how the election is starting, the result of it, how it's going. And I'm afraid of the future, because if the tech company and everything, the media, the way it took it, I've been in this country 30 years. I cannot, if there was no Facebook, I could go up and have a conversation with you. That's what Facebook was supposed to be. They're not supposed to fact check my opinion, but they can have an opinion. Media, the news can have an opinion. I cannot have an opinion, and I should have an opinion as a public.
I totally agree. And that's kind of ironic when you think about this. So I think for those people who have experienced this type of involvement of big tech or media censorship in the past, of where they were coming from, people from different backgrounds. So I'm German. We have encountered that, or I should say East Germans have encountered that. Mm-hmm. So yes, there is certainly there is more of a sensitivity for censorship and media, which really goes away from information and goes more into propaganda channels. But then when you look at it, also we have the face mask, which is kind of almost like an expression of silencing in a way. Exactly. I can definitely see where this is coming from, or how this can be
so weird when you just look at it. To me, it feels like everybody's mouth is shut.
Yeah,
it's just a face mask, but wake up. It's a way to shut my mouth. It's funny, like just you don't get to see who you're talking to. This is not, I need to see your face to get to know you, but when you see only the eyes, I don't even know who you are. And it's a way of me shutting because it's just weird how, it's like they're telling you that you have to have it on. No, in America, government don't tell you what to do. They can suggest this is good for you. It is my duty, my body. Like they say, it's my body, my choice. But in this case, it is not my body, my choice.
Do you think in terms of now you have your own business, and you told me at the beginning you actually have several businesses. What do you expect going forward in terms of how the business climate and your business operations may be affected by that outcome or in the direction we're going?
Well, as of right now, we know the House is going toward the Republican, which is, I still have hope, like I told you, if we still have the House. I don't think the Senate will help us with the people who owns business, with this huge tax thing there, Biden has been talking about. But if we lose the Senate, small business will suffer. Either it's not going to be the COVID that's going to happen. It's the tax. Biden will kill the small businesses, and people will be out of jobs.
Very different viewpoint, which I think actually once in the community, a lot of them, it resonates with a lot of people. There is the divide, but there's also different viewpoint. But I think many of the things she talked about are things we need to talk more about in the public space, because it seems to me that we're not that far off when we really talk about, some of these issues like the censoring, like how can you have your voice out. We all talked about we need to speak more about this, have more discussions about this, so we can actually bring it out more in the open, right?
Within my community and the friends that I do have friends who were Trump supporters who voiced to me, they didn't feel like they could verbalize that they were Trump supporters in the way that they wanted to. Maybe they wanted to put a nice big Trump Pence 2020 sign in their yard, but they did not. At some level, what I want to share with everyone that is listening and watching, and even on the show, welcome to our world. Welcome to our world, because the censorship, not hearing our voice, we're screaming. We're screaming. The oppressed, the suppressed, screaming, but your voice is falling on deaf ears, to the point where now you become marginalized. You become dehumanized, and you become silent. And even when you raise up again, you still feel like the doors are shut. So this does bring a point. Now, once again, we come back to that. We can use the phrase perfect storm. Now you've walked in my shoes a little bit, where you felt like you couldn't voice your concerns. You felt like you couldn't get up on a table and scream who you wanted to vote for. I love Donald Trump. You felt like you couldn't do that. Welcome to our world when many of the issues that we've had have been suppressed, have been overlooked. That is something that we have lived with, and hopefully now we can move forward and have a better understanding from both sides, from four sides. Like facets of a diamond, we can all come together and be one people.
That's actually a great example, because I think you're very right. And if you think about this, what it really takes for all of us to come together is we have to be able to walk in another's shoes for a while to really see what it's like. And maybe this was necessary also for many people really to see the other side, to go there and talk. I think that's really a good point. Now let's talk a little bit about the future. What do you want to see going forward? Annika?
Well, one, I want to see Trump, see what I'm doing? Biden keeping his promise of repealing the Muslim ban on his first day. And many Muslims are depending that he keeps his promise, and we know he will. There is also that he creates this citizenship pathway for citizenship for DACA recipients and for the undocumented. That he welcomes immigrants as opportunities for immigrants, and they feel safe and welcome to this country. There's also making sure that there's enough PPE provided, that he does the proper recovery and growth for our country, especially with the economy being in such a mess with people being unemployed. There's a solution for those who have gone through unemployment and continue to go through unemployment. Healthcare, which is massive for many Americans, even most middle-class Americans who suffer from not having enough healthcare access. So we look forward to him expanding on that and making sure that there's access to those who do not have it. And that's only of course, criminal justice reform and justice reform. When we talk about police brutality, when we talk about Black Lives Matters and minorities and people of color being affected by this largely, that there is some sort of reform, that there's training, the proper retraining of police officers, emphasis on mental health, aid and resources, but also the amount of immunity police officers have. There needs to be a question in our country about how much we allow a law enforcement over our citizens in this country.
What about you, Al?
And for me, I have a simple vision. A simple vision is that if Mitch McConnell is still the leader of the House, of the Senate, and if Joe Biden indeed becomes our president, that they can reach across the aisle, that they can sit down. He can invite Mitch McConnell to the Oval Office. He can go see Mitch McConnell in his office. That people from all angles and all perspectives can come together within our government, within the Congress, within the Senate, and speak to issues. I think what symbolizes that there is still tension that right now it's 48 to 48 in the Senate. So there's tension on that. Republicans want to hold on to that control because they feel that is their last bastion of hope, that they can hold on to the Senate. But I do know that the better angels within ourselves are also the better angels that are similar to our senators. That if there's an issue that we can work together for, that there will be senators who cross the aisle to vote with Democrats, and there will be Democrats now who cross the aisle to vote with Republicans. That is my vision. And if that happens, then we will propel ourselves forward. We will congregate to motivate, and we'll move forward.
Let me ask you something, though. What role do citizens have in all of that?
Yes.
Because here's my take on this one. Do we really live in a time where we can trust or even want political representatives to fight all the battles. What is the role of the citizen in that? So we live in a digital world. We're all interconnected. You can directly vote for things. There's so many technologies out there that are usable. What is the role of the citizen in coming together and in all of this process in making the changes happen and really get us fit and ready for the challenges of the 21st century?
Absolutely, to be active, to work on campaigns.
That's right.
I worked on the campaign during 2018, during the midterms. Such a thrill, such a thrill. I worked on a campaign when I was in my 20s. But to come full circle and be there at the midterm and understand the enthusiasm, also to understand the hard work. But that contribution of your time now brings sensitivity. Driving up and down Highway 81, being in Southwest Virginia, in little fire departments and little community libraries, and speaking to so many people that live a life that I'm not living, brought me much closer to them and a better understanding that I will always take forward with me. And I look forward to being back in that election. Justin Fairfax, who's lieutenant governor, will run again for governor at this time. I very much look forward to being involved. But that is something that's just about deciding to contribute your time, to be an active part of the process. And I'm speaking a little beyond your question. But that is I'm so grateful to President Trump for bringing millions and millions of people who were apathetic, who felt disenfranchised, who felt unheard, bringing millions and millions of new voters into the fold. They now feel like they are definite cogs in the wheel of the political process. So I am thrilled about that. I'm grateful to President Trump for being the catalyst for that, because that will be a wave of change that comes from that historical time period where this has happened. We can reach out and touch so many more millions of new voters. That has happened, and we can give him credit for that.
Actually, yeah, I think that's a really important point because it's the catalyst. And anyone who works in transformation or change processes, particularly, you need a catalyst. Without a catalyst who is the initiator, who really starts things up, we're not going to get anywhere.
Disruptor.
And you do need a disruptor. And perhaps, and I think that's also what bodes so very well with some of his background in business and things like that as a person. But I think the catalyst analogy is really important. And I think it's also for you at home to understand, for us to understand what the role of a catalyst is, because very often we tend to blame people right away or don't see the full picture of it when you go through a transformation process. You need to see the whole picture. There are adverse effects at first, something that most people don't want to see. When you go through a change process, the first thing is it gets worse. In fact, it's a milestone. If it doesn't get worse, nothing is changing. So it's you have to understand the process a little bit, and I think there's also a little bit more about educating how that process can kind of go forward, right? Annika, your take on what's the role of the citizens going forward?
I think it's a very important question. Again, I agree with that when we talk about catalyst. I believe either something is a lesson or something is a blessing. And in this case, it was a lot of lessons learned from having Trump, and revealed a lot of the realities that we have in our country. When we talk about citizens, I've been in the political in Virginia for 10 years, and I've worked on campaigns, managed campaigns, and now I work for a state representative. It's beautiful how a policy and a bill comes together, and it's because of citizens, it's because of people and organizers and grassroots folks reaching out to your elected officials, giving them the ideas on what you need done in your community, what policies you would like to push for. That's how legislators are able to do and serve you. So it is their responsibility to serve you, but it is also in you to go out there and let them know. Like Al said, there's something in our community that I might not know of, and different communities have different struggles, and the legislators necessarily might not know until you reach out to them. So one, if there's an issue, reach out to your legislator and lobby around it, find organizing around it, and get involved in campaigns. You'd be amazed to know how many candidates are truly humble and caring folks that do want to make sure that your voice is uplifted and that you're served, but you're also a huge asset. It's because of your votes and it's because of your advocacy that they're able to stay in power. So hold your legislators accountable.
Absolutely, and that's the democratic process.
To me, it's beautiful, I agree.
That is the democratic process. We do not live in a nation where justice is only that which is in the interests of the strongest party. That goes back to Socrates and Plato and a philosopher named Damascus who said, this is it. Justice is only that which is in the interests of the strongest party. But that is not democracy. The one man, one vote. I called my son yesterday and I said, Kendall, you voted. You got him there. Because I wanted him to feel that moment, that his vote was important to that moment that we had yesterday where we were able to exhale. And he doesn't fully understand that all the states haven't certified the votes right now. But that moment, he had a big, huge smile on his face because it was a vote that he felt made a difference.
Now we're almost at the end of the show, but I want to talk a little bit about one thing. So in organizations, very often, I've been a big proponent of rotating people into different departments so you understand what each department is about. Do you think that would be conceivable to do this actually in political parties and even working on campaigns so that people should work, for one political party for a while just to get your sniff in and then go to the other one so you see a little bit where the other is coming from? But it has to be quick. What's your take? Yes or no?
Yes.
Possible?
Definitely possible. I've been in those small fire departments. I've been in those small conference room and libraries. It can be done because we want to walk outside. We want to be friendly with our neighbor. That can happen.
Annika, what do you think?
I definitely agree. I'm used to, like Al said, speaking to Republicans who couldn't speak out with other people because they feel like they were judged or called bigots, right? But I think it's interesting how you put it together. I'm thinking of like a high school having interns go into like this one and this one without having a particular choice. So they have a growth and not just within their bubble. So I think it's very doable. And that's a great idea. I've never thought of really like forcing, like I've never really thought of like a curriculum having them go into these different areas, but I think that would be a great idea.
That's great. Thank you so much for both of you being on the show. And it looks like we're still deeply divided, but there are lots of ways of going forward. So once we work through the media and all these other things, then we'll actually hopefully get to a soul-level conversation, stop pointing the fingers, and really get to a point of understanding so we all take the power back to the citizens and we can step into our real human potential. That one is unlimited. So share your fears, hopes, and wants on our Facebook page if you like, facebook.com/Smart Sustainability TV. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next week.
Great to
Have
be
a good
here.
night.